I want to welcome everyone to today's session of the Faces and Traces of Violence. It's a pleasure and an honor to introduce you to two colleagues. Today they're very special colleagues whose guidance and mentorship have been key to my own scholarly development. It's not every day that you get to mix your fieldwork mentors with your university mentors. And both Tom and Beth have helped me learn the art of ethnography, while also paying attention to how anthropology can contribute to understanding the past and its many reiterations. So today is exciting that we can have them both here in our seminar. Thomas Abercrombie is a professor of anthropology at New York University, where he is also an associate faculty member in the Department of History and the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago and was the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2005. He is the author of Pathways of Memory and Power, Ethnography and History Among an Andean People, which explores the relations between European forms of historical consciousness and indigenous Andean ways of understanding the past. Drawing on his fieldwork in the Aymara community of Santa Barbara de Culta, Bolivia, Tom's book describes the cultural frontier between the colonial and the post-colonial and the Andean context by examining the places where anthropology and history meet. In 2016, he published The Iterated Mountain, Things as Signs in Potosí in the Journal of Latin American and Caribbean Anthropology. And his current book manuscript, New World Closets, is now in preparation. And he is also at present conducting fieldwork in Toro Zamora, where he is completing a project that elucidates the relationship among patrimonio cultural, patrimonio natural, and terroir, by examining how wine and the stories about it are produced as tourable or tasteable mise-en-scenes. He also considers how communities of production and consumers in the post-Fordist neoliberal economy are led to desire beverages as well as learn how to savor and appreciate them. Beth Penry is professor of history at Fordham University in New York. She specializes in the history of the colonial Andes and of early modern Spain, with an emphasis on cultural and social history that also draws on social theory, particularly on new approaches to colonial interaction, civilizational policies and conversion that attend not only to writing and its archives, but to the practices and material forms of politics and religion. Her forthcoming book, this is correct, The People Are King, The Making of an Andean Politics, is to be published with Oxford University Press, and is a major revision of traditional ideas about the origins of social and political change and of the long-term impact of colonialism. I may have gotten overly excited about having both of you here today, so these are really long, so I'm going to try to shorten them slightly. Beth's work also considers literacy among indigenous people and their use of reading and writing to seek justice. Her book, The People Are King, features holographic letters by native Indian writers written during the Great Rebellion on the late 18th century, and her work on resettlement in the early colonial period also emphasizes literacy, as indigenous people fought complex legal battles to make towns on their own terms. She argues that literacy was much more widespread among non-noble indigenous people than is commonly believed. Following this, her next project explores how important literacy was to ordinary Andeans by examining the kinds of documents they wrote and archived. Finally, her long-term research project, which is also connected to this presentation today, Comuneros in Castile and Peru, a study of Hispanic political philosophy and rebellion in the Old World and New, argues that a political philosophy of popular sovereignty and participatory democracy, neither of which are typically identified with the 16th century Hispanic world, was widely understood by common people in both Spain and the Americas through their participation in municipal life, which I think is very connected to a lot of the debates happening here in Madrid, contemporary Madrid. Her analysis of Hispanic political ideology and the political culture of which it was a product examines two rebellions that were 20 years and a half world apart, the Comuneros de Castile in 1520 to 1521 and the Peruvian civil wars of the 1540s and 1550s. Bienvenido, Tom and Beth. It is a pleasure to have you here. today.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's very kind of you. First of all, we would like to thank the organizers of the Faces and Traces of Violence seminar for inviting us to present this work. So thank you, Paco, thank you, Lee, very much. This is a work in progress. Our paper has its origins in the confluence of two different research projects, one in history and the other in anthropology. My own long-term historical project is to tease out the lingering human and ideological traces of Spanish formulations of the doctrines of popular sovereignty and just war against tyrants in Peru, thus the connection to the revolution of the Comuneros, and particularly the Peruvian civil wars of the 1540s and the 1550s, where the battle cry was Común y Libertad, and secondly, in the great indigenous rebellions of the 1780s. And this is an example of one of the letters written by indigenous rebels in the 1780s, where obviously they're borrowing the language from the Comuneros, referring to themselves as sumas amantes comunes. There. In this case, we had indigenous town organized forces who sought to defend the commune against the tyranny of Spanish corregidores and a turncoat native aristocracy. Thomas Abercrombie's project focuses on the heritage boom and its imbrication with the emergence of territorially branded products, particularly denominación de origen of wines and the promotion of wine heritage tourism in Castile and León. A series of research trips to the area and our joint residence during 2 sabbatical years, 7 years apart in the city of Toro Zamora, some 30 kilometers from Villalar de los Comuneros and not far from the Archivo de Simancas, provided the opportunity to repeatedly attend the commemorative festival held in Villalar every April 23rd, where Comunero history continues to resonate. That resonance is where the historical project meets the anthropological one. Neither of us is a specialist in the study of the Comuneros. That depends not only on a critical reading of a vast corpus of scholarly texts, but on combing through the massive documentation of the events held in Simancas. But both of us focus on matters of community and the commons, and the impact of liberalism of both the classical and neoliberal kinds, and political economic centralization on such subnational collectivities. Therefore, we do not intend to offer a new interpretation of the origins or development of the revolution of the Comuneros. Instead, we historicize its historiography, aiming to understand how past events, a revolutionary movement with a tragic and violent end, has been interpreted by successive generations of historians and by the general public, and how its commemoration has been recognized or silenced by governments of contrasting ideologies. We then turn to ethnography of the commemorative event, which we've attended several times beginning in 2004. Understanding the ritualized structuring of the commemoration, not only what is said in speeches or performed on the stage, but also the organizational forms into which participants are drawn and the collective activities in which they participate, helps us to understand how ideological programs become embodied stances toward the world. Each has its own effective registers that bind participants to or alienate them from political projects for the future. Through commemoration, these projects are granted deep temporal genealogies emplaced on a heritage battlefield soaked with old blood and new calimocho. The events at Villalar took place almost 500 years ago, but the histories we trace track back only 2 centuries, since the moment that constitutional projects like that represented by the Comunero Revolution were rekindled during the age of Republican Revolution. Over those 2 centuries, both the left and the right, and the liberalism both have sometimes embraced, have drawn on the Comuneros to justify their worldviews and policies. This historiographic discussion draws on works from the 19th through 21st centuries, but is very much indebted to recent work by Enrique Bersal de la Rosa, as well as the late 20th century historians on whom he draws, notably Stephen Halliser, Jose Antonio Maraval, and Joseph Perez. Key words. Our historiographic analysis aims particularly to tease out the tensions within the Comunero movement and the literature on it between different ways of understanding certain of its key terms: República, Común, Fuero, Libertad, and Nación. These terms have oscillated over the centuries, pointing to distinct reference that were widely global or narrowly local, ranging from the kingdom or empire as a whole to the villa and its shared commons and self-governing ayuntamiento. These terms already shifted among referents in the era of the Comuneros, when an early liberalism was already at work. But they shifted again rather definitively beginning at the end of the 18th century with the rise of the idea of the nation-state. Thus the rebranding of nación as the population of the state's sovereign territory, with República as the self-governance of the nation-state rather than of a host of autonomous villas, with town fuero as national constitution, and with libertad not as freedom of autonomous self-governance, but the freedom of the individual from the constraints of collective life. Since the death of Franco and the transition, nación, democratic representation, and control of economic and cultural life has settled between the two extremes of autonomous villas and the nation-state's governance of individuals, finding balance in the collectivities of Spain's autonomous communities and their self-governing cortes. Indeed, since the late 20th century, the commemoration of the events at Villalar have been sponsored by the Fundación Villalar, an entity created by the Cortes of Castile and León. Only by recognizing the shifting ground of the term nación is it possible to understand what was meant by this banner at Villalar reading Españoles fuera, Castilla Comunera. The instability of nación here, slipping between Castilla and España, serves to point us to the long-term dispute that was and is at issue between governance of individuals through a centralized state and its bureaucracy versus collective self-governance by autonomous and local entities. At its core, both the failed Comunero Revolution of 1521 and the politics of its commemoration since the Constitution of Cádiz turn on the distinction between kinds of personhood and governance that have been opposed and put into sequence by the grand Weberian narrative of historical sociology, where modernity is achieved through the victory of the possessive individual, citizen of a nation-state, over the sovereign collectivities of medieval corporatism. Pero ojo, interpretation of this particular historical event is carried out through the very terms by which modernity itself is defined or questioned. 19th century liberalism in the nation-state. The key to unlocking this paradox in the oxymoronic expression Castilla Comunera, Españoles fuera, rests in understanding the ways that core features of the modern nation-state imposed since the early 19th century were experienced at the grassroots level as threats to pre-existing kinds of what are now subnational collective projects. The first way the nation-state was experienced, of course, was with the substitution of a single homogeneous nation, now coterminous with the reach of the state, for the multiplicity of pre-existing nationalities. The second way the nation-state was experienced, and a key to the singularization and expansion of the notion of the republic, was with the abrogation of fueros, the special mini-constitutional contracts between the crown as central authority and the town republic with its elected council, which was the key of early modern governance. A multiplicity of republics, each with its own fuero, a constitution, were now replaced with a single republic and constitution. All regulatory powers were taken over by the nation-state. The villa's powers to protect itself through economic regulation, as well as the villa's special privileges such as tax-free ferias, were eliminated in the interest of free trade and open markets. This is the gate to Toro, and blazoned on the gate is this statement confirming Toro's tax privileges and the right to have a tax-free feria. Any king who wanted to enter Toro had to subordinate himself to the fueros and acknowledge the fueros before they could enter. Another example of the kinds of losses through this economic regulation were the Ordenanzas del Vino, by which guilds of winemakers protected the good name and price of their specific wines, controlling geographic rules and prohibiting the entry of foreign grapes or wines for sale in their towns. The third way the nation-state was experienced, and a key to the liberal project, was the seizure and privatization of the commons, a process that began with the 16th century composiciones, which was completed by the 19th century desamortizaciones. At the same time, through programs of secularization, confraternities and guilds and many of the collective festivities associated with Christianity were diminished. This hollowed out and transformed old ritual performances, which had political and economic weight, into mere folklore. The fourth way the nation-state was experienced was through the creation of provinces as instruments of rational governmentality of populations. Through provinces, liberals sought to sever the surviving sentimental ties within former kingdoms and naciones to forge the encompassing nation-state, with centralized military, education, and public health instituted to shape proper individual citizens subordinate only to the single source of sovereignty. The early 19th century architects of the nation-state at the Cortes of Cadiz adopted in their constitution the Napoleonic segmenting of the national territory. In this measure, the state seconded the repeated efforts of Bourbon reformers to annul special privileges that had been doled out to formerly autonomous kingdoms or naciones as they were swept into a single crown in the Middle Ages. But these strategies of rule also impacted the old imperial center. Castile and León reduced in 1833 to just 9 among Spain's 50 provinces. Indeed, the initial fervor of the first post-Franco commemorations at Villalar were repelled partly by the electoral campaigns deciding the shape of the autonomous regions, as provinces went to the ballot box to decide to which region they would belong, a process during which La Rioja and Cantabria, which had pertained to the Kingdom of Castile and León, withdrew from it. Taken together, these four interrelated strategies of rational modern governance, each of which was already envisioned in the 16th century, but only partially enacted until the late 19th century, aimed to sever pre-modern corporate bonds to produce a population of newly individualized, rational, and productive citizen subjects, beholden only to the will of the sovereign, whether that sovereign was the king or the people. From a Weberian point of view, they almost add up to modernity, although still lacking the Calvinism essential for making pursuit of pure self-interest into the guilt-free motor of capitalism. Max Weber might have described these regional autonomy movements as a resistance of old regime kinds of corporativity to the advances of modernity and rational governmentality. We might see them as forms of resistance to the capitalist extremes of neoliberalism. But the 19th through 21st century liberal assault on the medieval corporate order can also be understood as an attack upon the political, economic, and performative groundings of all forms of subnational collective life, ranging from the commons to the guilds to the confraternities to municipal level republican self-government. Right and left interpret Villalar. Interpretation and commemoration of the Comuneros and of their martyred dead, who are central to the story no matter which way it's understood, either as the end or the beginning of something noble and good. Either way, they're pawns in an ongoing ideological struggle. No matter how empirical they claim to be, the historical writings on which we draw generally divide between the left and the right. On the one hand, the left lauds the community and the commons and mourns the martyrdom of its leaders. On the other hand, the right, bemoaning the Comuneros as the last gasp of the Middle Ages, makes the defeated rebels into sacrifices whose blood allows 1,000 flowers to bloom, not the martyrs' communitarian ideals, but individualism and private property. Of course, the story is more complicated than that. Both the corporatist rebels and the individualist liberals who interpreted the Comuneros in the 19th century and during the Franco regime shared an acceptance of hierarchy, of king or caudillo as master patriarch, governing nobles who ruled commoners, who themselves were familial patriarchs who lorded it over women and children. The age of the brotherhood of citizens in the nation-state has not yet led to generalized equality. Likewise, the Commune, for all its egalitarianism when it came to rights in the commons, was chief agitator in centuries past against internal minorities such as Jews and Moriscos. Here we focus on the autonomous region of Castile and León, reconstituted in the Constitution of 1978 from the provinces into which it had been divided in 1833, and the autonomy movement that helped to push this agenda beginning immediately after the death of dictator Francisco Franco in 1975. Beginning as a relatively spontaneous demonstration on a historical battlefield, that movement has been consecrated as the official celebration of the Dia de la Comunidad, a festive event that draws enormous crowds to a tiny town every April 23rd on the anniversary of the 1521 defeat by mounted aristocrats loyal to Charles V of a mostly plebeian rebel alliance of militias from the town republics of the region, Its historical reference are the defeat and the beheading of the rebel leaders there, and the resonance of the rebel constitution and its Third Estate colorings with the ideals of the brief and utopian Second Republic, overthrown by Franco in the military uprising culminating in 1939. Before our first visit to the commemoration at Villalar in 2004, we discussed our plans with acquaintances who were appalled and scolded us for attending a right-wing commemoration. Although they had not attended themselves, they were certain that any festival with support from the regional government of Castile and León had to be a mouthpiece for the Partido Popular. That turned out not to be the case. Indeed, apart from the Cortes de Castilla y León, major sponsors of the event were the PSOE, the Partido Comunista, Izquierda Unida, and major labor unions along with anarcho-syndicalists. And the key symbols on view were the flags of Castile and León and the Second Republic. Several years later, in 2010, while living in Toro in Zamora province during our sabbatical year, we made a third visit to Villalar on the 23rd of April with the idea to appreciate the convergent ideological struggles that were structured in its ritual poetics. But the continued singularity of Villalar as an ideological operator was made patent to us that year when, over a long wine-soaked sobremesa with friends in Toro, we made known our intention of attending that year's commemoration at Villalar, perhaps to write about it. Before we could say a word, we were told in the voice of authority by an activist in the Partido Popular that it would be a waste of our time to go, that the participants at the contemporary festival of Villalar, and us as well, completely misunderstood the meaning of the revolution of the Comuneros. We were told that all those who think that the Comuneros fought for liberty and democracy were mistaken, a gaggle of misinformed communists. The actual leaders, we were told, were a handful of disgruntled noblemen seeking greater advantage with a different ruler. That was the end of the conversation, which was impossible to continue with civility. This is also, of course, how discussions of Franco's civil war and the exhumations of Franco's victims end in any ideologically diverse group. In what follows, we ask why the historical memory of the revolution of the Comuneros has remained so powerful over nearly 5 centuries, and examine how interpretations of the meaning of the Comuneros have been put in the service of various political ideologies. In part, the answer to why it currently holds such appeal may lie in the words revolution and comunero, as succinct rebuttal to political centralism and the depredations of neoliberal capitalism.
My turn. The revolution of the communities. The Comunero Revolution has been famously heralded by José Antonio Maraval as the first modern revolution, particularly in its bid for popular sovereignty via a third estate dominant constitutional monarch. It has also been interpreted as the last gasp of the Middle Ages because of its organizational resurgence of town-based corporatism and opposition to state centralization and empire. Without retelling the well-known story in any detail, it's worth recalling that the revolt ensued from the coronation of Carlos I as Carlos V, Sacra Católica Real Majestad, and his attempt to impose a new tax through manipulation of the representatives of Castilian villas to the meeting of the Cortes that was called for that purpose. Vecinos of the villas saw this as a violation of their fueros, the contract between town and crown that ceded some of the king's sovereignty to the ayuntamiento. Rebels were advocates of local, town-level, face-to-face democracy, and were highly critical of both the representatives in the Cortes and the oligarchies that tried to monopolize their municipal councils. They were also sorts of proto-nationalists, bridling at the German-speaking Charles' aspiration to be Holy Roman Emperor and his grasping Flemish hangers-on, one of whom was named Archbishop of Toledo at age 18. Less widely known are the rebel economic motives pointed out by Joseph Perez. Favoring his Flemish subjects, Charles had dismantled wool export restrictions that had favored Castilian textile mills. This avant-la-lettre free trade policy hurt especially the local economies of textile-producing cities like Avila, Toledo, and Segovia that became Comunero strongholds, while Burgos, which specialized not in textile production but the export of wool, benefited from the new arrangement and remained the most royalist of Castilian cities. Some aristocrats joined rebellious Pechero commoners, but it's reasonable to conclude that the high nobility's loyalty to the crown and events like Antonio de Fonseca's burning of Comuneros' stronghold Medina del Campo also fostered an egalitarian, anti-aristocratic sentiment among the artillery-carrying foot soldiers whose forces, stuck in the mud at Villalar, were finally decimated by a noble cavalry. Along the way, the allied Comunero militias produced a constitution for a parliamentary monarchy that granted veto power not to the king, but to the commoners, in the very fashion of the 17th century British system. That astonishing document, written while Hernán Cortés was still engaged in the conquest of Mexico, referred back to the Fuero General of Alfonso el Sabio and also looked forward to the creation of an empire-wide republic. It included a clause prohibiting encomienda, the crown policy that gifted Indian labor to worthy conquistadors. With this prohibition, the Comunero Constitution showed as much concern about the subject status of Indios in the colonies as of Pecheros in Castile and León. It also demonstrated the rebels' multi-scalar understanding of collective rights, in which the fuero de villa was embedded in the cortes of the kingdom and that in the governance of empire. And it demonstrated that rebels were aware that Castile's estamentos sociales were undergoing transformation in the Indies. Españoles in the Indies were transformed into de facto aristocrats who monopolized private property, while they prohibited such property rights to Indians, leaving them only with common-hold property. If such ideas were transferred back to Castile itself, where both hidalgos and pecheros had private property rights and rights in commons, it would certainly have heralded very bad tidings for Castilian pecheros. Historicizing the historiography and commemorating defeat in Villalar. Given its complexity as a phenomenon, it's not surprising that the Comunero movement has served as a foundational historical anchor for diverse political and ideological causes over the centuries. Late 18th century Spanish liberals recovered the Comuneros in an invented tradition, suggesting that its demands for autonomy, though municipal rather than individual, constituted an original Spanish liberalism, suppressed by absolutism. The Napoleonic invasion of Spain, followed by the Cortes of Cádiz, further fueled such ideas, expanding them to find a historical charter for constitutionalism. In 1821, on the 300th anniversary of the Revolution, the secular canonization of the martyred Comunero leaders led to attempts to exhume their bodies, which were presumed to be buried at the foot of Villalar's pillory, to give shape to a republican pantheon. In response, royalists seized the bones, which may or may not have been those of the leaders, burned them, and tossed them into the Duero River. In 1822, a decree called for the names of the martyred Padilla, Bravo, and Maldonado to be inscribed on the walls of the Cortes as defenders of the liberties of Castile, and for a monument to be erected at Villalar. Similar efforts following the short-lived First Republic of 1873 and 1874, leading to monuments and also to romanticized battle scenes and representations of the leaders' executions. In the wake of the Bourbon Restoration, scholars such as Danvila and Menéndez Pelayo began the process of turning the Comuneros into anti-moderns, opponents of the centralized state. The tables were turned once again during the Second Republic, but once the insurrection of Franco and the Falange overthrew it, executing so many Republican municipal officials, labor organizers, and Reds, Comuneros were returned to their status as a backward-looking feudal nobility in a losing fight against the modern state. But by 1951, when Franco authorized the production of the historical epic film La Leona de Castilla, focused on the heroic Mujer Fuerte, the Comunero leader Juan de Padilla's widow, Maria Pacheco, he had use for a reinterpreted Comunero rebellion as proto-nationalists struggling against the intrusion of foreign political and economic interests. The film suggests that the rebels died defending Spanish tradition from foreign perfidy and traitors who allied with those foreigners, all a slanting reference to the Russian revolutionaries behind the Rojos that Franco's forces defeated in 1939. And here's a clip from
Esta es la justicia que manda hacer su majestad y los gobernadores en su nombre, con estos caballeros, mandándoles degollar por traidores. ¿Mientes tú? ¿Y quien te lo mandó decir? Traidores no, defensores de la libertad del reino.
Silencio, señores. Ayer fue día de pelear como caballeros, hoy lo es de morir como cristianos.
Quiero ser el primero. Dejadme al menos que no vea la muerte del mejor capitán de Castilla.
Ver que nos queda más consuelo que Dios, el único que nos mirará como enemigo.
commonalities among these conflicting laudatory interpretations are the already polyvalent terms común and nación, and a focus on the defeat of the army by an alliance of royal nobles, and more particularly on the beheading of the leaders in the central plaza of the town of Villalar. Every cause welcomes martyrs. The question for post-Franco Spain has not been whether Bravo, Padilla, and Maldonado are martyrs, but what cause they died for, and what more recent dead joined them in their martyrdom. Franco's Comuneros were nationalists. Since Franco's death, they have of course become Republicans, democracy's martyrs in the fight against centralist tyranny. Since the death of Franco, the commemoration has grown from a regionalist seizure of Castile from the Francoist right into a mass rock concert-like celebration of the Republic, leftist political parties, unions, and supported by demands for greater regional autonomy of folkloric music and dance and regional agriculture and cuisine. In its first 20th century incarnation in 1976, it was a forum for demands for democratic opening, legalization of the Communist Party and others, and for legislation for autonomy for Spain's regions, including not only Catalonia, Euskadi, and Galicia, but also Castile and León. That celebration failed to gain a permit, and the 400 or so who managed to bypass roadblocks were chased away by a charge from mounted members of the Guardia Civil. Press reporting of those events and the emergence of the Tierra Comunera party pushing hard for a statute for Castilian autonomy brought 20,000 to Villalar in 1977. That year, it was the Guardia Civil who had to run. Here is a clip from a film of that year's events. If I can. Okay.
Hemos actuado en Villalar con los comuneros del grupo de San Juan Evangelista.
Nosotros entendemos por autonomía el que los beneficios que produce nuestra región redunden en las personas que vivimos dentro de esta región. Entonces los castellanos reivindicamos nuestro derecho y venimos a reivindicarlo aquí, a Villalar.
Y el que más tenga que ayude al que menos. Exactamente. La lectura es más, por el caso, que ayuden a una comunidad, en conjunto una comunidad de todos los pueblos de España.
Pretendemos ser autonómicos. Tenemos fuerza, tenemos energía eléctrica, tenemos agua y tenemos trigo. Tenemos industria también. No queremos que la gente migre del campo a la ciudad. Que los pueblos sean pueblos, que no sean vertederos de basura como son hasta hoy. Los pueblos castellanos son una porquería, hablando mal. Y la gente migra, la juventud no tiene dónde... Vamos, por no tener puesto de trabajo, ni colegios, es decir, no tienen ni retretes.
The attendance at the event swelled to 200,000, kind of a Woodstock of Villalar commemoration. Since then, attendance has hovered between 20 and 30,000, which is a truly astonishing crowd in a town of under 500 inhabitants. Starting in 1986, the Fiesta Villalar, now coinciding with the Día de la Comunidad Autónoma de Castilla y León, has been organized by the Fundación Villalar, a group arising from the reality of the reinstitution of the regional Cortes. The political right had generally stayed away, though since 2006, Partido Popular politicians have regularly, though always very briefly, dropped in on the festivities, sometimes greeted with stones. The manifesto calling for regional autonomy became a consensus document until reading of the document, Consensus Now Lost, was dropped in 2013. Political parties still produce manifestos, and in 2016, a radio call-in show asked listeners to call in with suggestions for the manifesto. Collectivities of culture, food, and wine. What jars in this celebration and in the creation of the autonomous community of Castile and León is the effort of celebrants to divorce Castile from Spain. That's because Castile was promoted under Franco as the traditional heart and soul of a Spain that required the submersion of peripheral nationalisms and their Castilianization. From a Basque or Catalan point of view, Castile is the Spain from which they seek autonomy, while for many progressives, Castilian traditions still reek of Franquismo. This paradox is especially striking given the prominence of the folkloric and traditional in the festivities. But of course, this is where the right and left converge. One sees above all an abundance of peñista scarves, consumption of massive paellas, of enormous quantities of chorizos salmantinos, jamón de guijuelo, cecina de león, queso zamorano, and the wines of Toro and the Ribera del Duero, all products identified by place of origin in Castile. No flamenco costumes are to be found in Villalar. Franco's picturesque Spain was Andalusia. This one dresses in charro costume and plays castañuelas, yes, but while dancing jotas to the music of gaitas and chirimías. Right and left also converge through the lobbying efforts of local chambers of commerce, associations of agricultural producers, grape growers, and winemakers, for whom demonstrations of pride in regional customs and products, such as those of Villalar, reinforce efforts to lobby the European Parliament to protect those products and to seek from UNESCO protection of regional heritage. Right and left come together in celebrating the paradoxical effect of Europeanization, not the erasure of locality one expects of American-style neoliberal globalization, but the heightening of regionalism and its translation into economic policy, favoring regionally branded products. A prime example of this is the Sabor de Castilla campaign, which markets products with regional designations, denominaciones de origen and indicaciones geográficas protegidas. And here another little clip. Oops. This is an advertisement for
Castile and León. El Ribera del Duero, cochinillo de Segovia, el sabor del lechazo, queso zambrano, cecina de león, deliciosa ternera, o jamón de guijuelo. Perfecto.
Castilla y León, tierra de sabor.
Okay.
How old is that?
This is, I'm not sure actually, about 2010, I think. Villalar is a massive event with a ritual structure, one that separates persons from their daily routines, throws them together in a highly charged ritual space, a blood-soaked battlefield and a pillory where the martyrs' heads rolled, binds them to particular collectivities, to political parties, labor organizations, music fan groups, etc., merges them into a single mass, whips them into a liminal frenzy, and then after a long night of partying and listening to music, releases them back hungover to their everyday lives with a transformed sense of self. On arrival, The participants put on scarves linking them to a particular cause and its adherents, following the festive traditions of Castile itself. They become peñas, groups organized to lampoon authority and carnival, to burn effigies in San Juan, to demand the key to the town hall from the mayor, to mark a temporary takeover of power by the self-organized people, or by youth, or by women, or to run with the bulls or accompany the patron saint in procession. These the techniques used to rally participants are very much the core of organizational forms in Castilian folk custom. These political peñas then merged through their shared adoration of the flag of the Second Republic and the purple flag of the Tierra Comunera into a single mass to listen to the manifesto, the medieval music of the Nuevo Mestre de Juglaria, lyrics updated into contemporary political satire, and the varied claims of Castile y León against the king, the political right, and against the centralizing Spain that would erase regional autonomy. They move en masse among gigantes and cabezudos to the pillory at the center of the town square for laying of wreaths and to witness a dramatized performance of the sentencing and beheading of Padilla, Bravo, and Maldonado. They then get something else to eat and drink, and perhaps buy a souvenir from a stand run by descendants of Spain's former imperial subjects, traders from Otavalo, Ecuador, or from Morocco. All-night music, dancing, and partying in the tent city on the battleground ends the affair. And just some very brief, you can leave the lights.
Castilla entera se siente comunera. Castilla entera se siente comunera. Castilla es un hijo de mío, caballero encarnado, marinero sin importa un trovador, amordazado, barco quedó parado, tus marineros al paro, tus poetas desterrados y tus sueños.
Few dwell on the historical specifics of revolutionary programs or rebel acts prior to April 23rd of 1521. Defeat and martyrdom is at the center of things. And this, and the Republican flags, is where right and left truly diverge on Villalar's issues. Just like the left, the right also draws upon collective euphoria and festive production of Victor Turner's Comunitas to rally their voters and to live their castizo festive lives. But those on the political right prefer their Comunitas in a Catholic venue, following devotion to the host or the patron saint or perhaps a corrida de toros. They do not like to see that Comunitas, that sense of belonging to face-to-face political communities, and of co-commensals who must share motives and aims as they do food and drink, in the tent of the anarcho-syndicalists or the Communist Party. They surely do not appreciate seeing that collective euphoria draped in the flag of the Second Republic, or Villalar's all-night heavy metal concerts attended by thousands of anti-fascist college students, each with a 2-liter bottle of Calimocho, and expressions of disdain for Spain itself consequent to this region's efforts to distance itself from Franco's Castile-centered casticismo generally help keep the Partido Popular supporters away. Almost unmentionable even at Villalar is the question of whose Civil War dead should be commemorated along with Comunero martyrs. Not even at Villalar does the exhibit of the Asociación para la Recuperación de la Memoria Histórica draw much of a crowd. They go, but no crowd. Villalar's martyrs link today's political causes to a more distant and less divisive ancestry. The celebrations at Villalar embrace a fragmented and delegated notion of sovereignty, an impulse at the heart of the creation of Spain's autonomous communities. Of course, fragmented sovereignty tends always towards further fragmentation. The people of León do not all embrace the idea of being merged into Castilla y León. Some prefer León sin Castilla.
sobrevivía. No queremos pertenecer a una falsa autonomía. León sin Castilla, León sin Castilla, León sin Castilla.
And who can forget the efforts within León for a Bierzo Libre? I'm not going to play their end. However much fragmented sovereignty of a Castile versus the Spanish center may strike modernists as ludicrous, it surely is one link uniting the historical Comuneros with 21st century battlefield reenactors. Another link is the foregrounding of face-to-face democracy over the representative kind. Though at Villalar, the collective euphoria of the liminal ritual moment only evokes, rather than instantiating, practices that historical comuneros actually carried out. Villalar's real democracy now is a ludic one, framed, as were the activities of the 2011 15M, largely in ritual time and space, rather than in effective political action. Of course, nostalgic appropriation of the ritual sociality of small-town public festivals can also have political effects. 15M, of course, has been reincarnated as Podemos, whose power has been consolidated in part through alliance with regional parties. Other political economic effects have emerged from the promotion of regionalism at the meeting point of economy and culture in the region's marketable historical patrimony, foodstuffs, and cuisine. Sub-state collective life has been demonized by neoliberalism, and particularly the commons, which the World Bank holds to be an antiquated and underproductive obstacle to development. Their main evidence for this, apart from Enlightenment-era philosophers, is a 1968 game theory essay by political scientist Garrett Hardin, The Tragedy of the Commons, which posits that an unregulated common good, such as the open sea, will inevitably be ruined by the pursuit of individual self-interest. He admits, nevertheless, that the argument only holds true for non-regulated commons. Those of Castile certainly were not that. C.B. Macpherson has argued that property must be understood as a social relation involving things. What distinguishes private property from the common kind is that the private sort enables to exclude others from enjoyment of a thing. Commons, however, is a right of members of a collectivity not to be excluded. They are fundamentally different sorts of rights, and they differ in another way as well. Private property is fundamentally alienable, while commons were and are treated as inalienable, removing them from the marketplace. Not being able to own or sell the public square is what most annoys today's neoliberal investors. Earlier in this talk, we pointed to 16th century Ordenanzas del Vino as an example of mechanisms of collective control over economic life that were abolished, along with commons, during the 19th century in the continuing march toward the commodification of everything. That destructive wave, which has seen the privatization of municipal properties, has also expanded into the realm of intangible intellectual property. It was against such depredations of medieval city centers and then of customary practices that UNESCO was pushed to develop its categories of Patrimonio de la Humanidad, whether applied to monuments or to practices such as Semana Santa processions or Carnival Murgas. Of course, these things are placed entirely outside of the realm of property. For UNESCO, it does not matter whether the Roman aqueduct of Segovia is privately owned or a common good. Only preservation, not for a particular community, but for all of humanity, is the aim, to be accomplished through a regulatory regime much like those which municipalities used to be able to enforce on their own. Of course, the process also makes such UNESCO sites into commodities of another sort, into tourism destinations. In the realm of wine, France led the way to defend its system of denominaciones de origen when faced with transnational pressure to open its food and beverage markets, creating an international body, now allied with the United Nations agency, the World Intellectual Property Organization, to regulate the branding of its geographically denominated wine. The result has been the expansion of regulatory bodies that write rules eerily similar to those that were contained in 16th century ordenanzas to promote and protect the name of regionally identified wines. In this case, a version of collectivity, mostly private property owning vintners rather than the community as a whole, has transformed a common good, what was a common good, into a marketable aspect of commodity. Wines, cheese, garbanzos de fuente sauco, and other products with denominación de origen, as well as the patrimonial sites of medieval town centers, are the commons of capitalism. They help to preserve local economies as a whole, even as they produce radical inequalities, where the owners of patrimonial capital benefit the most, while some trickle-down effect benefits the broader community. At the very least, regionalism within Europe and autonomy movements such as that celebrated at Villalar help to remind governments and transnational capital of the moral necessity of community, of some kind of collectivity, while the branding of tourist destinations or products, such as those of the Tierra de Sabor, serves at least as a placeholder to mark the value of community, even if that value now is the commodity kind. To return to Castile and León, it remains to be seen in these times of permanent economic crisis what kinds of cross-cutting political winds, among them surely opposition to the Euro Pact of increased austerity measures, but also the forces of economic globalization and the potential erosion of all resistance to free market capitalism through the TTIP, may yet prove challenges to this emerging regional entity, and what interpretations of the historical Comuneros may yet prevail. That's the end. Thank you.
Time for questions and debate, which we can also kind of do a bilingual question and answer session for those of you that would prefer to ask questions in Spanish. Someone want to start?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por vuestra exposición tan poliédrica, ¿no? Que hay tantas cosas que a veces es difícil de por dónde entrar, ¿no? Pero bueno, por el interés de mi propia investigación, hay un comentario que has hecho, Tom, que tiene relación con la desconexión de Villalar con el movimiento de exhumaciones, ¿no? Y me gustaría que lo elaboraras un poco más, o entre los dos, en el sentido de que has conectado exhumaciones con la RMH, pero hay muchas de las asociaciones que participan en Villalar que sí que apoyan, o sea, no solamente es la RMH la única, ¿no? Y luego eso me lleva a otro tema que es también muy interesante, es cuáles son las claves de la reconstrucción republicana que hay detrás de todo este sector, digamos, que va con banderas republicanas, ¿no? Porque es evidente que, bueno, las imágenes que habéis puesto del 78 son espectaculares, ¿no? Porque hay ahí, pues, realmente con la Guardia Civil y todo esto, ¿no? Justamente después de la muerte de Franco, pues era muy valeroso, ¿no? El mostrar todo ese desafío, ¿no? Y buscar una España republicana, y ahora, pues, bueno, 40 años después parece que estamos reinventando, ¿no? Y de qué manera ha evolucionado la idea que estos grupos tienen de lo que la República fue, cuál es la memoria de la República.
Yo creo que es allí donde un poco se fragmenta la colectividad, donde bueno, es muy fácil hablar de reconstruir la República, de reinstalar República, pero hoy en día son muy pocos que realmente cuando hablan de República están hablando de la segunda. Están imaginando algo más para el futuro, muchos de los jóvenes. Hay los de la izquierda, por supuesto, de los partidos, de varios movimientos de la izquierda, que por supuesto están involucrados en demandas por la justicia, por ejemplo, de las víctimas del Franco. Pero yo creo que para la mayoría este no es, por lo menos en lo que pasa en Villalar, donde no hay un acto en el escenario, no hay una demanda en el manifiesto para exhumación. Las demandas son más bien para la protección de, bueno, el fin de la monarquía, en primer lugar, y la protección de especies, digamos, de colectividad autónoma de todo tipo. Y por eso, cuando viene un grupo de folcloristas, mujeres sesentonas, cantando y bailando jotas en sus trajes costumbristas, están bienvenidos, ¿no? Y refleja algo que queda detrás de lo que la gente se imagina cuando piensan en República, que es autogobierno, que es control de lo nuestro, que es tener autonomía, pero una autonomía que es, como una caja china o muñeco ruso, en lo cual cada uno es metido en un grupo mayor y más grande. Y para mí esto es lo que quise ver como etnógrafo, entender en Villalar cómo funciona cuando 1000 demandas, muchos de ellos, contradictorias, se puesta en una misma escena en que todos los que participen imaginen que están de acuerdo. Todos están de acuerdo en estos festejos. Y lo pueden imaginar porque están involucrados en los mismísimos formas organizativas y formas poéticas de la colectividad y de festividad que suelen beber mensualmente o semanalmente, en sus pueblitos o en Madrid, donde sea, y surgen los mismos especies de grupitos, podemos decir, ¿no? con lazos fuertes entre sus miembros, en lo cual un montón de grupitos se pueden fundir a un solo movimiento, mientras que no hablan sobre especificidades, ¿no? Entonces, sí hay siempre cada año un montón de folcloristas que están ahí, que hablar de las víctimas del Franco les horrorizará, realmente, que quieren olvidar de esto y progresar hacia otra cosa, ¿no? Pero, nadie les fuerza a hacerlo. Y eso es lo que hace funcionar, digamos, el evento, ¿no? Es un poco como también funciona todas las manifestaciones grandes, digamos, hechos en formas, utilizando las formas del anarquismo. 1000 flores pueden surgir y todos pueden sentirse de acuerdo, aunque hasta que tienen que escribir un programa política, ya se complica la cosa, ¿no? Entonces es un poco por eso que leer el manifiesto se ha desaparecido últimamente, porque el manifiesto sería el documento en lo cual ya parece obvio que los motivos son en desacuerdo. Y bueno, al final, para mí, ¿qué es detrás hablando de los cuerpos de estos líderes? Son los únicos cuerpos exhumados, digamos, que están representadas en Villalar. cuando se practica una exhumación actual de víctimas de Franco hoy en día, los parientes, los descendientes de los exhumados tienen varios motivos. Algunos no quisieron nada, otros quieren conseguir los cuerpos, los huesos, para hacer un entierro santo y correcto y, no sé, cerrar la familia así. Lo hacen por motivos colectivos, sí, pero familiares a veces, y a veces políticos, quieren reclamar los valores de los muertos. Y bueno, hay muchos y contradictorios motivos de lo que buscan justicia, y justicia tiene muchos sentidos entre esas personas. Y lo mismo tiene para mí República para los participantes en Villalar, que a veces lo que escuchan es si el pueblo, mi pueblo, debe tener más poder para, no sé, mejores escuelas o lo que sea, mejores toros, o abolir los toros, lo que sea, pero poder y autonomía local. Y otros están pensando en programas nacionales y, bueno, cosas muy distintas. Y al final eso es para mí lo que me interesa en ello, y explico un poco por qué, aunque atrae 20 o 30 mil personas cada año, hay muchísimos más que ni van ni saben qué pasa en estos días, ¿no? Que es un festivo en Castile and León el 23, que es el lunes, creo que es día festivo este año, y saben eso, y aunque saben que hay un evento enorme a 30 kilómetros de toro, la mayoría de los toresanos no van, o porque es muy político, no quiero meterme en nada política, o es muy de izquierdas, o es muy de derechas. Bueno, tienen un montón de argumentos, pero la realidad es que no conocemos a nadie en toro que va. Somos los únicos que nos dirigimos hacia ahí. Mientras los miles vienen a autobuses que son ya organizados por partidos, una gama muy grande de partidos políticos y entidades, digamos, políticas, y en su gran mayoría son estudiantes universitarios y más jóvenes, que quedan 2 noches y es un festejón.
Sobre el Día de la Comunidad, o sea, que si has analizado por qué razón se eligió este evento para, en el 2006 dijiste que fue, ¿no? Cuando se declaró oficialmente la Junta de Castilla y León el Día de la Comunidad, porque es una comunidad gobernada desde siempre por el Partido Popular, ¿no? Y de repente esa contradicción que puede haber con un movimiento tan heterogéneo, donde hay izquierda, extrema izquierda, heavy metal y todo ese tipo de cosas mezcladas, ¿no? Pues digamos, están reclamando un símbolo de vuelta, ¿no? Pero habría otro repertorio, imagino, de posibilidades, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué es lo que hay detrás, ¿no?
Bueno, yo detrás creo que fue que la Junta y el presidente, ¿no? de Castilla y León imaginó que podía manejarlo un poco el asunto y dirigirlo hacia otro fin, porque lo que él vea cuando va, que es muy poco porque no es bienvenido, lo que vea son gigantes y cabezudos, son grupos folclóricos como los de cualquier fiesta religiosa en los pueblos castellanos, y parece que es algo que se podía dirigir un poco hacia otro patriotismo. Y bueno, al final hay elecciones, existe la política para el derecho tanto en las comunidades autónomas como en oponerlos. Entonces, no sé si me explico, pero yo imagino que pero no sé, no he entrevistado a los que hicieron
Sí, pero es interesante dar a la
Tiene
comunidad...
que ver con la Fundación Villalar, que también es un poco opaco lo que son sus intenciones. Si vea la programación que viene de la fundación, no verás los anarcosindicalistas, no, esto está detrás, ¿no? Y lo que está enfrente es un evento patriótico de la comunidad y que tiene que ver con las nuevas instituciones democráticas y con el nuevo digamos, plan económico para salvar a Castilla y León, que es la comida tierra de sabor, este programa y denominaciones. Es una región altamente agricultural y que no tiene tanto más en la mayoría de la zona, aparte de la agricultura. Entonces, ¿cómo potenciar la agricultura para que la gente no tiene que emigrar? Y es únicamente así, añadiendo valor a unos productos que ya valen por ser del lugar, de cierto lugar, como garbanzos de Fuentesalco, que como saben, si lo van a comprar, cuestan el doble o el triple de cualquier garbanzo de mercado, que puede ser de Turquía o donde sea, donde produce por menos. O los vinos, que ya no podían en Castilla competir para la producción de los vinos más baratos de Europa, otros ya han ganado, otras regiones de España ganan, que la producción no es tan alta en Castilla y León como es en Valdepeñas, por ejemplo. Y entonces estos proyectos económicos que ya el gobierno tiene que tomar en serio, están ya entremezclados con los proyectos políticos regionalistas. Y bueno, no pueden denegarlos sin realmente dañar las economías locales.
No, porque me interesa mucho todo el tema de las denominaciones de origen, ¿no? Me ha parecido ver en la ordenanza del vino del siglo XVI que has puesto que había una prohibición de que llegara vino, como una especie de pureza genética del vino, en el sentido de que no podía llegar uva de fuera de la región, ¿no? Que eso, bueno,
Sí.
que denominación de orígenes. Pero estaba pensando también un poco en los vascos, ¿no? En cómo están construyendo su identidad, incluso podemos decir que, bueno, pseudogenética, como sea, en torno a cierta leche, ¿no? A cierto queso, ¿no? Entonces es un tema que me resulta muy interesante y ahora se expresa de la misma manera también en Castilla y León, como puede ocurrir con el Idiazábal, por ejemplo, que es un queso extraordinariamente interesante para un antropólogo, ¿no?
El queso sano es un caso en punto, o el lechazo de Castilla y León. Estos son, bueno, hay un montón de productos que ya tienen denominación o indicaciones geográficas, ¿no? Un montón. Y esos son los productos que competen en el mercado europeo, en el mercado español y también en el resto de Europa, donde lo que buscan cualquier europeo es un producto auténtico que está relacionado con un pueblo con historia y raíces, que está pegado al suelo en algún lugar. Y así funciona la denominación de origen. Y bueno, en cuanto a la similitud de las ordenanzas corrientes de denominación de origen que prohíben, bueno, que definen una zona geográfica, las uvas tienen que proceder de ahí. Tienen que ser cierta especie de vid, ¿no? De cierta forma, tienen que bueno, un montón de regulaciones, que no se mete uvas de afuera, que no recibe esta etiqueta, que le da denominación sin ser revisado por los veedores del órgano regulativa. Y mira, las regulaciones las ordenanzas que existieron en el siglo XVI hacen lo mismo. Establecen una autoridad, demandan que no se metan uva extraña excepto lo que proviene de ciertos viñedos y no nombra los viñedos aceptables. Y es para poder regular, bueno, es que los del siglo XVI eran parte de unas capacidades que tuvieron las villas de regular la economía local. Es decir, que no se podía vender vino de afuera, excepto a cierto precio, mucho más alto que el precio del vino local, para proteger los productores locales, para que en general la comunidad tenía que tomar el vino producido allí, que daba vida. Entonces, no permitían competencia con malos vinos de afuera. Esa es parte de las ordenanzas. Y la otra parte es proteger la fama y nombre de su vino. Y los de alejos, muy importante, porque eran en el siglo XV y XVI los vinos blancos favorecidos por la corona y mencionados por no sé, los grandes autores de la época como el mejor vino. Había dos vinos, el blanco de alejos, que ahora es una esquina dentro de la denominación de rueda. Entonces perdieron el nombre de vino de alejos, ahora es vino de rueda. Y el otro era el vino de toro, que era el vino oficial de los reyes católicos, el rojo oficial. Y cualquier torresano te diría que es el vino que Colón llevó en su primer viaje, bueno, que es verdad. Era vino de toro, era renombrado por ser un vino muy fuerte, con muchos taninos y un nivel de alcohol muy alto, es decir, que viajaba bien.
Se incorporan, digamos, los proyectos regionales de investigación, también están incorporando mejoras, digamos, de la cepa o de... Que yo me acuerdo, yo estuve un tiempo en la Universidad de Extremadura y me acuerdo que había un equipo de investigación que lo que hacían era probar jamones serranos. O sea, eran unas reuniones maravillosas porque estabas allí. Entonces, claro, ellos iban mezclando los cerdos, los iban modificando incluso genéticamente la especie de manera que el producto fuera de mayor calidad, ¿no? También me acuerdo de un escándalo que hubo en Euskadi cuando detectaron camiones con leche de oveja de la meseta pasando a Euskadi para hacer idiazábal, que eso claro fue el gran escándalo porque claro, el idiazábal y la identidad vasca están entonces de repente era como una polución, ¿no? Por eso me llamaba la atención todo esto, ¿no?
Bueno, el hecho es que tiene razón, porque la leche que surge de ciertos lugares alpínicos, se dice.
Sí, alpinos.
De pastos alpinos son distintos de leche que proviene de otro foraje, entonces producen un queso diferente. Esto está bien establecido. Y bueno, puedo revelar un poco lo que he descubierto de lo que es el terroir, que para mí ya tiene que ver casi enteramente el mundo microbio de la comunidad. Entonces, imaginar que un vino tiene que ver con las personas, la gente de una zona, y no solamente su clima, de esa especie, de este tipo de vid, pero de los seres humanos que viven allí, es muy cierto. Y lo que es problemático para los productores del vino hoy en día es un poco poder manipular o producir, digamos, los microbios necesarios para la fermentación en un ámbito ya aséptico, que tienen que, bueno, empezar con un espacio antiséptico, y resulta que los microbios necesarios no están en la uva que viene del viñedo, están en los cuerpos humanos, están en el, bueno, y siempre la fermentación pasaba por contaminación sin conocer, ¿no? Y hoy en día tienen que hacerlo intencionalmente, controladamente, y hay un montón de laboratorios que buscan reproducir en una forma, digamos, industrial, ciertos microbios que dicen que son de Toro o de Ribera del Duero o de cualquier denominación, y la fuente que tienen que, la fuente a lo cual recurren realmente es el cuerpo humano. Al final es el cuerpo humano quien contamina el espacio de la bodega, y luego, bueno, entonces estamos hablando ya de comunidades microbiológicos, y bueno, en lo cual antes los burros también participaban, todos los animales, todo lo que conectaba el viñedo a la bodega. Bueno, es mucho más que la procedencia de uvas, y todos los productores lo saben, pero también saben que no pueden hablar de ello, porque disgusta a los consumidores imaginar bichos. Bueno, es la única forma de hacer vino, o queso.
Homologado, pero hay una leyenda rural para que dice que ciertos vinos tintos fuertes pues le echan un gato muerto, por ejemplo, ¿no? Para que cojan cierta, o un animal muerto, o un trozo de jamón, o ese tipo de cosas.
El toro, que
Sí.
precisamente
Precisamente el vino de toro. Bueno, puede ser un jamón o un gato dependiendo de la economía familiar igual.
Quería hacer una pregunta en relación. Se ve que cuidan mucho el producto propio de la tierra. Se preocupan dando en cuestiones culturales, como por ejemplo trajes típicos, etnografía, cuestiones de pues eso, trajes típicos, canciones típicas, y lo transmiten, quiero decir, lo enseñan a las nuevas generaciones, a los niños en el País Vasco, los niños aprenden a bailar desde que son niños, o sea, me refiero a eso, si se transmite eso, no solo es la preocupación
sí,
por el producto propio.
Sí, por supuesto. Bueno, cada uno de esos pueblos que tiene un patrimonio cultural que quieren promocionar como de interés regional o de interés nacional, bueno, siguiendo la escala que tiene el Estado, o quizás de interés mundial, que sería buscar protección de UNESCO, que es algo que los de Villalar pudieran hacer, que ahora es una costumbre bien arraigada, y bueno, tienen obligación de asegurar que los costumbres, el patrimonio inmaterial, se sigue con vida. Entonces hay que probar a las entidades de que estás enseñándolo, que está siendo transmitido sin distorsiones, que quiere decir que ya no puedes cambiar nada, que deja de ser una costumbre viva y hay que copiar de año en año lo del pasado. Entonces sí, y bueno, yo lo he visto este año, por ejemplo, en Toro, Semana Santa, que ha subido una peldaña, y ya es de interés regional y no solo local. Entonces el ayuntamiento ayudó a las cofradías a dejar de usar las bandas y en su lugar poner caja y chirimía, que era el costumbre de antes, y el costumbre de los pueblos más pequeños que no tienen suficiente para hacer una banda, ¿no? Y es mucho más lindo y parece, pues es más auténtico, es más auténticamente castellana y de esta zona. Y por supuesto, cada pueblo tiene sus folcloristas y que han ido recolectando la música, la indumentaria, pero mira que puedes ir a una tienda en Zamora, en Toro es más difícil, es pequeño, pero en Zamora puedes ir a comprar la ropa típica de Toro y bueno, es muy caro. Es que pensábamos conseguirlos, pero es muy caro. Pero sí, ya está bien controlada la protección, la reproducción de todo esto y sigue siendo involucrado aún en los proyectos de izquierda estas tradiciones que son ligadas a especies de democracia, de autogobierno local que reconocen que tienen que ver con la vida familiar también, que no son tan lejos de una reunión de los quintos de 2010 o algo así, ¿no? Que se juntan en la fiesta y van a su peña y bueno. Estas tradiciones colectivas, podemos decir, para mí son la base para la construcción de las ideas grandes de lo que es República al fin. Y es lo que lo hace más factible en España que en Estados Unidos, donde faltamos muchas de estas tradiciones colectivas. Y entonces lo que es democracia, bueno, no saben gran parte del pueblo lo que es. Ir a votar por presidente, elegir un fascista.
I want to ask a question about the historical reenactments so that are part of this festival in Villalar. So, for instance, you spoke about these beheadings, and I was wondering, really, I mean, it's a question I suppose related to the language that people use, the people that are there on the ground, as it were, the language they use to talk about something like that. Because you mentioned in your paper historical memory, and I'm wondering if the people that are there use those kind of terms, so something like memoria or memoria histórica, to talk about something that happened so long ago. I mean, are those terms that people would use to relate to something like that? I mean, we quite frequently in Spain hear historical memory as something being related to the Spanish Civil War, which is an event obviously a lot closer in time. But is an event that distant still referred to in the same way?
I think that's really our theoretical term that we raised for this paper more than a term that we've heard used. Would you say you've heard it used?
I don't think it would. I think it is accepted. One can talk about historical memory. What comes to people's minds is the Asociación para la Recuperación and a law of historical memory. But I don't think it would, contradict what most participants think about what they are involved with when they watch the reenactment of the execution, which is, which looks much like the scene in the 1951 film, in the Francoist film, carried out by a group of actors.
Ask a question about that because I wondered about it in terms of publics at executions. I mean, you mentioned also explicitly in your paper the fact that there was quite a gruesome history of executions first with the end of the so-called Civil War and then afterwards. Years ago, the Cleveland Museum of Art did an exhibition about Art Nouveau in Barcelona. And as part of that, they exhibited a very famous painting from the 1890s which showed an execution by garroting in a public environment. And that the public display of that painting in 1890s Barcelona, as far as I learned from the exhibition catalogue, caused quite a stir, because up to that point, these executions were not public. So there was suddenly a display of something that the government did, or the state did as part of its monopoly of a certain type of violence, or justice, or retribution of justice. And so I wondered how, we are now after ISIS execution videos, and I don't know what else you could discuss violence in Hollywood movies. We are used to a certain type of graphic violence that was not necessarily part of visual display decades ago, but also the whole question of how is the public present if the state executes. In the US, you have the press present whenever the death chamber is working in whatever state. So what is actually the tradition of having public or hidden executions and suddenly making then an execution part of a historical ritual in this very charged context of the transition from Franco to post-Franco to now, which sort of would line up with your question.
That's a wonderful question. I don't know. It makes me think that is part of the appeal, actually, of the event is the reenactment of the execution, of making visible. There's a very big crowd. Everyone moves into the plaza to try to see this. It's overfull. Not everyone can reach the stage to see what's going on. But many of them have seen this film, what does it do? It, in fact, makes public a kind of violent end that for those whose political sympathies are with the Second Republic and for the victims of Franco, makes public and visible that which had been hidden in some way. Makes a connection between this very deep historical past and a more recent one, and makes visible what had been hidden. Without explicitly saying so. I mean, these parallels are established for all of those participating, and each individual draws their own conclusions. Now, the actors aren't saying, we are. The executioner is not saying I'm, a member of the Falange, but it is assumed. It is assumed by the audience members that the victims, those who are being beheaded, are compatriots of theirs as Republicans. And I think that's part of what helps to produce a kind of cathartic moment, after which everyone then moves to the tents at which the rock bands are set up, and the level of sound rises dramatically, and the dancing, the event moves into a kind of frenzy of partying that in some ways, in bodily form, cements an experience as something that must be lived. Right? One has to do something immediately after seeing this terrible scene, and that something happens to be singing and dancing, but as a political act. Singing and dancing as a collective political act with maybe a political future. But on the other issue of, it's interesting to imagine for what period of time executions have been or were made to be concealed, because right up into the 18th century they are public, taking place at pillories, and you have many very well-known people garroted, whose Marqués de Siete Iglesias, Rodrigo Calderón, comes to mind, only because I've followed him around as a historical figure a little bit, and because his body is on display in the convent he founded in Valladolid, where the head is actually separated from the body, and the nuns tell you that happened when he was garroted in public in Madrid. So, there are plenty of figures like that the Spanish population might know about. to envision those acts. But then there are also, I don't know, El Verdugo, the film by, I can't remember. Berlanga. This wonderful film that's unimaginable. I mean, it's hard to conceive of how Franco's censors let this film be shown. It is, well, no, they were blockheads. They were incapable of recognizing satire. But it's a film that follows, I don't know if you've seen the film, it's about the life of an executioner and the complications that ensue. It's a comedy about an executioner. So things may have been concealed, but they were never out of people's minds.
No, that's of course, I mean, that's just, that was not the assumption, but at the same time, you have right now in the public debate on violence, there is a certain topic of sort of whether the public display, or, if in the discussion of ICs, one of the huge criticisms always that it is so public. And it sort of very conveniently forgets how public violence used to be in the European context. I mean, the Germans had public executions shortly before Hitler took over. I mean, there were, these things are not necessarily so far away from us as we wish to remember right now.
Absolutely.
I have a quick, maybe last question. I can do it in English or Spanish, but I'm wondering, since you guys have observed this ritual over time, have you noted a difference in the way the commons is used or talked about or symbolically deployed in relation to both the crisis and the increase in austerity? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because here in Madrid there are a lot of recent debates around the commons, both in relation to Podemos but also to the municipal movement. So I'm just wondering if you've noticed any sort of change in how that's appropriated or used.
I think the quick answer is no. We're not coming up with that. But more to the point, I don't think there's actually any discussion of commons at this event. Commons as I think almost everyone involved has participated in discussions about commons, which are a matter in the communities and towns and cities of Castile and León, that leftist local governments are actively in the process of trying to recuperate commons that were sold during the desamortizaciones in the 19th century. And so it's a matter of local discussion in towns and communities. No, there's plenty of discussion about what it is to be a commoner, a comunero, and about what it means to have a cause in común. But commons, in some ways, I don't know, I have to say that at the event, I have not heard much discussion of reference to in manifestos commons per se. The projects are enormous and very small. And not so much about recuperating the actual commons. And it seems to me that where people actually experience that is in things like denominación de origen. It's our food, it's our custom, this is our dancing, that are already being experienced in their transformed shape, right? As kinds of commons for capitalism. As I suggested, ones that don't, in which ownership is not at issue. But I don't know, in every one of those communities, real commons are at issue. But no, I haven't heard that there. Where you will hear that is if you go to a meeting in any one of the communities or cities that's involved, of the local, I'm forgetting the term now, specialists in fungi, and mushrooms, who every fall in every one of these towns there's an organization, no matter how small, Toro has one, organization of people who study and collect setas, right? So, and many of them have truffle dogs, and they spend a great deal of time in the forests that used to be the town commons that are now private property of various kinds, or it's the military's property, or it's somebody's. They have to break in. They're illegally engaged in these acts. They usually do not have licenses when they take their truffle dogs into the forest, or when families go out in search of Niscolas in the fall. I've gone collecting. Everyone does this, right, in these towns. That's when the commons and its necessity for preserving it comes into view. And I think to address your question, Lee, yeah, that is on people's minds because they are now so much more dependent on these kinds of clandestine, under-the-table economic activities to feed themselves directly by eating things that they get in the commons, and indirectly by selling things with high worth that they can get in the commons, whether it's piñones or what have you. And a huge amount of discussion there. But, you know, like all the cities of Castile and León, Toro doesn't have a commons anymore. It was sold to a series of different, a big chunk went to the church eventually, and so they're always, in fact, trespassing when they go into the commons. So, yeah, I don't know, that was a long-winded response to say that, no, in the event, commune has a wide range of meanings, and things held in common, to be part of a collectivity, to be a commoner rather than an aristocrat. It reflects all of those sorts of things, and which is why I think it has such resonance. But when they're out there in the fields in Villalar, they're on private property. And they're on the encampment, and all of the tents are on the farms, you know, a field owned by a particular family of Villalar, and who has to cede this property, and so far they are doing it to allow this event to take place. But if they would refuse, there would be complications, because there are commons in Villalar.
Recuperando un poco la pregunta que ha hecho Fernández al principio sobre las claves de la reconstrucción republicana, a mí me ronda un poco por la cabeza si de algún modo se han producido algún tipo de contradicciones o de resemantizaciones de símbolos, por ejemplo, que originalmente, de significantes que originalmente parecen proceder de una cultura de antiguo régimen, como es por ejemplo el caso del torreón dentro de una estrella de 5 puntas, ¿no? en colectivos de una izquierda muy amplia, en la que se dan cita incluso pues organizaciones anarcosindicalistas bien conocidas en el Estado español, en el sentido de, bueno, quizás en otros procesos de rebeliones producidas en el seno del antiguo régimen en Europa, quizás tenemos más documentado un corpus ideológico de contestación directa del antiguo régimen, de propuestas de ciudadanía universal, ¿no? Es el caso de los anabaptistas en Centro Europa, o de los niveladores británicos, o los cavadores también británicos. Quizás en el Estado español yo creo que esto está más en una nebulosa, ¿no? Porque a lo mejor quizás los líderes de la rebelión no lo manifestaron de una forma tan clara, pero hay algunos historiadores como Pablo Sánchez León, por ejemplo, que sí plantea como una distancia entre el horizonte de los comuneros más de abajo que participaron y los líderes a los que luego normalmente son a los que los que quedan, digamos, para la posterioridad. Sin embargo, probablemente las ideas emancipadoras más potentes no partían de ellos, sino del horizonte de malestar de la gente de abajo, de los más pecheros, por así decirlo, que a lo mejor no quedaron en la visibilidad de la rebelión. Entonces, bueno, os quería preguntar, porque yo no soy experto, yo vine más que nada sobre todo por el background americanista que tenéis, que es de lo que os conozco, pero es un interrogante, ¿no?, que siempre me da vueltas en la cabeza, ¿no? ¿Cómo se ha producido un poco esta resemantización simbólica, ¿no?, de significantes que pueden remitir a un viejo poder y que sin embargo en el imaginario actual remiten pues a una idea del fin de la monarquía, de la protección de la colectividad autónoma, como habéis mencionado, y que se expresa sin embargo a través de significantes que parecen como muy tradicionales para colectivos, por ejemplo, anarcosindicalistas, ¿no? ¿Qué habéis vosotros como etnógrafos visto al respecto? ¿Os ha llamado algo la atención?
Todo el evento contemporáneo en Villalar, como los eventos de 1520 y 21, eran llenos de contradicciones. Eso es cierto. Es cierto que los arquitectos de la Constitución de Ávila que promulgaba eran los más letrados y los más nobles. Pero la mayoría de los activistas en la revolución eran pecheros, por supuesto, y que luchaban a pie y con su artillería. Y los nobles que les acompañaron pudieron haberlo hecho algunos para salvarse la vida, hablando, bueno, francamente. Pero no deja de ser al final un movimiento a favor de ciertos derechos defendidos hasta la muerte por los mismos pecheros, que es la habilidad de autogobernarse dentro de República. Y, es decir, son los cabildos, los ayuntamientos de los buenos hombres pecheros que al final organizan la acción y formulándose como partes de las milicias, las hermandades que daban un poco de esta organización en ese momento. Empelaron, digamos, la coordinación que era necesario para que no fue simplemente una pequeña revuelta repetida 1000 veces, ¿no? Y aún dentro de sus cabezas, sin embargo, ya existieron contradicciones. Cuando hablaron de República y de fuero, también se enteraron de la existencia del fuero general. Ya desde el siglo XIII existió esta distinción entre el fuero local, fuero del pueblo, y el fuero general, que supuestamente iba a cubrir todo el reino y que daba lugar a la existencia de las cortes como un órgano representativo, ¿no? Y es solamente a través de este órgano representativo, de la acción de sus apoderados en las cortes, que los pueblerinos se dieron cuenta de que les traicionaba a sus representantes, que estaban siendo sobornados sobornados por Carlos, etc., que sus intereses no seguían en pie. Entonces, sus motivos sí son protección del fuero y de sus derechos como pueblo, pero también sus derechos de determinar lo que ocurre en el reino a través de una constitución mayor que incluía todos los pueblos. Entonces, ya se oscilaba el significado de república entre los pueblos, muy distintos. Y es solamente en el siglo XIX cuando el primero, lo del pueblo, deja de existir. Y ya república refiere solo al gobierno nacional, ¿no? Del Estado-nación, o de un posible gobierno de reino otra vez, de cortes, repitiendo una estructura anterior. Y para mí, bueno, podemos reír a los castellanos cuando quieren, bueno, votar a los españoles, pero su demanda tiene ciertos sentidos, tiene sentido y resonancia histórica en reconstruir una entidad republicana al nivel regional. Las Cortes, ¿no? Autonomía de Castilla y León, que ya también tiene gran resonancia en el mundo europeo, como son regiones que tienen representación, no la nación española, pero sus regiones, y que es al igual modo la política económica de la Unión, de reforzar estas regiones a través de sistemas como denominación de origen, etc. Bueno, entonces tuvieron razón en buscar un intermedio entre España y el pueblo, pero la resonancia de repúblicas y de comunidad y común sigue siendo tanto hacia afuera, a una entidad más grande, a España, y la tercera república sería esto, no sería Castilla y León, sería España. Bueno, y el local, el pueblo mismo, esta resonancia sigue siendo oscilar útilmente entre los extremos, de lo cual Castilla y León es un centro conservador del pasado, ligado a los antepasados, que uno puede reclamar como los fundadores de lo nuestro, etc., que aceptan los de derecha como los de izquierda, como su historia compartida. Pues tiene cierto sentido.
No sé cómo lo ves tú, pero ese juego que se ha establecido en los últimos años, sobre todo a partir del caso catalán y vasco, como si fuera una contraposición que España, simbólicamente España es monarquía y república es lo local. Como que pareciera que hoy día en España no se puede pensar la república a nivel español. Se habla de república y al menos gran parte de la izquierda remite directamente a lo local. Y el gran fracaso del PSOE es ese que no sabe cómo nombrar esa imagen de esa España republicana. Y el PSOE nunca ha podido resolver ese problema. Entonces, es realmente imposible pensar una España republicana a nivel estatal, digamos, o finalmente la única salida es lo local con estos movimientos que uno piensa, los aberchales vascos, la CUP catalana, o los mismos comuneros castellanos. ¿Es realmente un choque irresoluble?
A lo cual no podemos responder. Abre una caja de Pandora también con el asunto catalán, y lo cierto es que aunque hay independentistas castellanos, hay pocos realmente que quieren separarse de España, ¿no? Realmente, como Estado, no, eso no es el plan. Entonces, entre los que están en Villalar, simpatía por los catalanes, cero, yo diría. No poco, pero cero. Es decir, que estos catalanes es otra cosa, ¿no? Son los ricos que no comparten, son los menos como nosotros que hay. Bueno, y no es su independentismo que es el problema, creo. Es su arrogancia, según los autorizados, ¿no? Se lo imaginen como una arrogancia que no tiene intención de servir a los intereses generales de España. Y los castellanos sí imaginan hacerlo, sea con o sin rey.
Que ellos sí representan el interés general.
El interés general es más autonomía y localidad, más dispersión de la soberanía. Y en eso lo tienen, en eso lo comparten los sentimientos los anarcosindicalistas, quienes, rechazan el Estado, pero no rechazan la autonomía. No, demandan autonomía y autogobierno, pero a un nivel, en donde nosotros somos los miembros del sindicato.
Eso no lo veo tan claro. Como esa idea de república y todo esto represente, por ejemplo, al nacionalismo catalán o vasco.
Pero en el caso catalán, por ejemplo, siempre se ha hablado ahora de República Catalana. Nadie, yo creo que nadie piensa traer un rey...
Vale, en ese sentido sí.
Como que monarquía pasa a ser sinónimo de España y república de lo local. Por eso cuando los castellanos plantean esa idea, en el fondo, ¿quién debate o quién le pone nombre al interés general? Sí que aceptamos que hay un interés general de todos los países, porque eso es lo otro.
Vamos a poder solucionarlo, pero indicar dónde están unos de los problemas graves y que es todos estos términos que introducimos al principio, no solo república, pero común, que refiere a un rango muy grande de cosas, y nación, igualmente, oscilan. Y la nación puede ser la patria chica de tu pueblito. O una región que más o menos iguala a un reino antiguo, o la extensión del idioma que hablas. O hay muchas maneras de definir lo que era nación, que eran el sentido del antiguo régimen. Hasta finales del siglo XVIII nadie se imaginaba nación como la población que habita en el territorio del Estado. La nación era algo más opaco que tenía que ver con la descendencia, con los cuerpos, con la cocina, con lo que se comía, con el clima, un montón de factores no muy bien definidos. Y se remontaba desde localidad pequeña a extensión muy grande, hasta que los españoles se imaginaron ser una nación, que también no ocurre hasta el siglo XVIII, que se imagina realmente que esta es nación española, que este sentido de nación fue muy tardío. Entonces, cuando ya se habla entonces de independencias o de lo que es la nación, mira, es posible escribir una constitución como Bolivia, lo de Bolivia, que es un estado plurinacional, dejó de ser república, ahora es un estado plurinacional para incluir distintas naciones, ya hablando de indigenidades, ¿no? y porque los españoles no pueden hacer lo mismo. Que sería reconocer que no somos una nación, pero varios, y los linderos no son bien definidos, y un montón de problemas intervienen cuando realmente hay que decidir a cuál nación perteneces, si tu madre es de Asturias y tu padre de Castilla, y bueno, complicaría nuestra vida pensar así. Pero es muy fácil para los catalanes o los vascos definirse como una nación natural, que así eran definido la cosa antiguamente, natural, que merecemos ser Estado, tener linderos ciertos y tener nuestro propio Estado. Entonces el problema al final es la oscilación de esa palabra entre un sentido del siglo XIX, del Estado-Nación, al sentido más restringido, que es cultural y algo vago, o tiene que ver con sangre, o idioma, o cocina, de esas cosas. Y siempre cuando escucho los españoles hablar de la situación catalana o vasca, es ahí donde los barcos se naufragan. Para mí, en las contradicciones y entre estos sentidos de esas palabras que son muy distintos. Y bueno, entonces nadie sabe de qué habla. Lo único cierto es que España tiene una imagen en la mapa, ¿no? Uno que ya estábamos hablando, cuando ves el pronóstico del tiempo, ves que tiene un hueco gris en su parte sur occidental, que es donde Portugal sería si admitimos eso en nuestras mentes, este espacio gris. Pero tiene cierto, bueno, es un cuerpo, es un sólido, es un territorio.
Pero no en las televisiones autonómicas.
Bueno,
En
no.
la televisión autonómica vasca tienes Euskal Herria con las 7 provincias.
Ok, pero digamos en la 2.
En la 2, sí.
Así es. Y bueno, imaginar la salida de los catalanes es imaginar este espacio tornando gris como Portugal, ¿no? Que ya se reconoce como un miembro fantasma, que se ha cortado hace tiempo y todavía se siente un poco, pero no se lo ve, ¿no? Pero así se imagina, es la desmembración del cuerpo. Y por eso, bueno, hay que combatir cualquier esfuerzo de segmentarnos, ¿no? de cortarlo, de dividir, es perder España.
La piel de toro.
La piel del toro. Sí, hay que dejar en pie el cuerno.
Inició la vida de Portugal, eso es de Estrabón, el sático de Estrabón incluía Portugal y toda la península.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. ¿Os podéis quedar a comer con nosotros hoy? ¿Podéis quedaros a comer?
Por favor.
Pues entonces, bueno, ya sabéis, los que queráis continuar la conversación, bajamos abajo al comedor de aquí. Y bueno, queríamos anunciaros que la siguiente sesión será el 4 de mayo. Viene una investigadora que ahora mismo está localizada en una universidad australiana, que se llama Olivares, y va a dar una conferencia también en inglés, aunque luego también se podrá hablar en castellano con ella, muy interesante sobre situaciones sobre los Balcanes, el posconflicto en los Balcanes, básicamente a través de obras de teatro que reflejan los testimonios de las mujeres y el sufrimiento bélico de las mujeres entonces, bueno, ella va a hablar de distintos grupos de teatro que están tratando de reciclar el lenguaje femenino en un lenguaje dramático, y bueno, pues estáis todos más que invitados a venir, y bueno, yo creo que va a ser muy interesante. Muchísimas gracias a ambos por estar aquí.
Gracias.